I suppose it is a common, popular understanding among Buddhists, especially Theravada Buddhists, that Arahants don't have any mental suffering, or rather no more mental unpleasant feelings. But there's one interesting discovery made by Asma Dr. Analayo, a professor in Buddhist studies in the University of Hamburg. That is found in an interesting passage or story that most of us are familiar with. When the Buddha first became enlightened, he thought, the Dhamma that I've realized is profound. And beings have their eyes covered with a lot of dust. If I were to preach this Dhamma and beings don't understand, then this would be a vexation for me. So it's better for me to stay unconcerned. So that was his first thought. So what is vexation? Isn't vexation a form of mental suffering? So it seems from here that the Buddha also feared that he would have some mental suffering, a sort of frustration, because the Dhamma is so deep. If he tries to teach it and people don't understand, then he might feel frustrated, to use a modern English word. Of course, you know the story. Brahma Sahampati read the Buddha's mind, came down from the Brahma world and implored the Buddha to teach, because he said there are still some beings whose eyes are not so covered by dust. Correct? So then the Buddha made use of his psychic power to verify that there are beings whose eyes are not fully covered and they could understand. Some of them could understand. And then he decided to teach. So based on this passage, it seems as though the Buddha himself could also experience unpleasant mental feelings. However, some people question this story. And there's a conspiracy theory going around. This is Buddhist propaganda. Why? This is to show that Buddhism is greater than Brahmanism. Because Brahma had to come all the way down, to ask the Buddha to preach. Correct? So, now again you have a dilemma. You want to believe the sutta, or you want to believe in the conspiracy theory? Okay, so up to you. Yet, there are also 3 cases of monks, Arahants, who committed suicide during the Buddha's time. Correct? The commentaries, of course, denied that they were Arahants who killed themselves. The commentaries prefer to stick to this idea that Arahants are not able to kill themselves. So what the commentaries say is that these people thought that they were Arahants and they killed themselves. After they slashed their own wrists, then they found out that they were not Arahants, and they looked back at their feelings and they attained Arahantship at the moment of death. That's what the commentaries say. But if you look at the suttas themselves, it doesn't seem to be that way, because the Buddha condoned their killing themselves. The Buddha said that the taking of the knife to slash themselves was blameless. So there's also another question mark, right? Why would the Arahants kill themselves? One was suffering from illness, the other was suffering so that he could not go into the jhanas, which he had previously attained. Okay, so there's also another food for thought. Okay, if you want to do more research, please go through the suttas. Another thing that I want to bring to your attention is this story about Moggallana. According to the commentaries, as Moggallana did some heinous crime before in the past. Some commentaries said he killed his parents, another commentary says he tried to kill his parents, so the commentaries are not in total agreement. And one commentary says that before he died, he was the object of jealousy by the non-Buddhist ascetics at that time. So they plotted to kill him because he was too powerful. He had too many stories to tell about hell and about heaven, and so he managed to convert a lot of people into Buddhists. So they were very jealous, and they wanted to get rid of him. So they sent all these gangsters to finish him off. And so what happened was, according to the commentary, he was in his kuti, and these people came several times, and he escaped several times through his psychic powers. And then finally he asked himself, why is this? They are coming so persistently. I've been escaping 3 times. Now they are coming again. And he recollected his past life, and he saw his heinous crime, and he thought, okay, this is the law of karma, must repay my karmic debt. So he allowed himself to be cut into pieces. Not just beaten to death. He was cut into pieces, like mince meat, and left to die. But because of his psychic powers, he pieced his body together, flew to the Buddha, paid his last respects, and then parinibbana in flames. Interesting story, isn't it? Spicy, huh? Just ideal for entertainment during the Buddha's time or during the commentary's time, because there were no videos. So the monks were the greatest entertainers. They came up with all sorts of Jataka stories and commentaries, spice up the stories to make people interested. But the suttas never said anything about this. Nothing is mentioned in the suttas about how Asma Moggallana passed away. What is mentioned in the sutta is the story of Angulimala. You all know him, right? What happened to him? What happened to him? Huh? Was he killed? Was he stoned to death? Huh? What did he do? He killed a lot of people, right? How many people did he kill? Who was the 1,000 that he had in mind? It's not in the suttas. That's in Sunday school, not in the suttas. The sutta never mentioned how many people he killed, let alone his mother being the 1,000th target. And the suttas also never say that he was stoned to death. But maybe it's due to a mistranslation. I checked to several translations, and from the English translation, it seems as though people threw stones at him, and he hurt him. Now, the actual story is like that. The actual Pali says that clods of earth, gravel, and broken pots thrown elsewhere landed on him. Okay? This is the literal translation of the Pali. So actually, the commentaries explain that these people were not aiming the clods of earth or the gravel or the potsherds, broken pots, at Asma Angulimala. They were throwing these things at stray dogs, pigs, and crows to chase them away. And then Asma Angulimala happened to be walking past, and these things landed on him. So one day, he stood in front of the Buddha, and his head was bleeding, his robes were torn, and the Buddha said to him, this is my paraphrase of what the Buddha said. He said, Brahmin, be patient. You're lucky to get away with just this. After all the bad deeds that you have done, you would have baked and been cooked in hell for many years, for many hundreds of years, for many thousands of years. That's what the Buddha said. Full stop, no spices. Okay? So you can see that Asma Angulimala was already an Arahant, but he still had to suffer. I mean, this is a canonical story, not the story of Asma Moggallana, because that's non-canonical. Nothing is mentioned in the sutras about how he passed away. And you also know that our Buddha had a lot of backaches, yeah? Usually in the evenings, he would start off a talk, and then before finishing, he would ask somebody else, like Asma Moggallana or Asma Sariputta or Asma Ananda, to continue with the talk. He said, my back is aching, I'd like to lie down for a rest. Talking about suffering, you all were talking about suffering. And you seem to think that suffering only relates to feelings, right? Mental suffering and physical suffering. Pain in the actual sense. But I wonder whether you're aware that there are 3 types of suffering. You have dukkha dukkha, viparinama dukkha, and sankhara dukkha. Dukkha dukkha is very obvious. It's painful pain, painful suffering, either bodily or mental. And then viparinama dukkha is the suffering of transformation. Actually, it refers to sukha. When there is happiness or comfort, then if there is clinging to that happiness or comfort, then when that goes away, then there is craving for it, and that could be suffering, longing for something that is no longer there and wanting it to be back again and not getting it. So that is a second type of suffering. The third sort of suffering is sankhara dukkha. Sankhara dukkha means whatever constructions, whatever phenomena that has arisen due to causes and conditions, that phenomena itself is suffering, whether there is pain or no pain. When we talk about the 3 characteristics of existence, anicca, dukkha, anatta, we are referring to these conditioned phenomena, these constructions. Again, to go back to what Minyat said just now about the clinging aggregates. In the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, the first discourse given by the Buddha talked about the Four Noble Truths, and he defined suffering. What is suffering? Birth is suffering, aging is suffering, sickness is suffering, dying or death is suffering, correct? Then he went on to say, being separated from the beloved is suffering, association with unloved is suffering, not getting what you want is suffering. You don't need a Sammasambuddha to tell you all this, right? Even children know that. Not getting what you want is suffering. But in the end, he says, Panchupadana Khanda Dukkha. In brief, the 5 aggregates subject to clinging are suffering. So as long as you have the 5 aggregates, there will be suffering, whether or not you have pain, physical pain or mental pain. Right? So when you talk about sankhara dukkha, as long as there are 5 aggregates, there will be suffering, sankhara dukkha. So, what could the answer be? If you want to make an end of suffering, you must make the final passing away of the aggregates. So that's the answer. There's no both, either one or the other. So klesa parinibbana does not actually relieve you of the suffering of the khandhas. Right? Whether you suffer from diarrhea or whether you suffer from illness or not, having this khandha is suffering itself. Correct? Imagine if you don't eat every day, if you don't drink, if you don't urinate, if you don't defecate, if you don't clean yourself, how much suffering will that be? And then this mind is arising and passing away from moment to moment without any stop. That is also suffering by itself. So these khandha, the 5 khandhas by themselves are suffering whether you have pleasant or unpleasant feelings. Okay? So the answer is khandha parinibbana. Simple. Okay, let me run through this, summarize this before we go on to the next section. This sutta basically says that we can't run away from the results of karma, and we must experience its results sooner or later. Sooner or later means either in this very life, in the next life, or on subsequent occasions. And we cannot be liberated without having done so. And by liberation, we mean making an end of suffering in samsara. That means the physical death of an arahant, not just the moment of enlightenment. Although this sutta says that one must pay back all our karmic debts before you can make a complete end of suffering, right? But it doesn't tell us how much you got to pay, whether it's 1-to-1, an eye for an eye, or tooth for a tooth, or is it on compound interest, or is it at a discount, right? It's not stated. Now, some of you, I think very few of you, have read through the whole sutta, and if you look in the details, you will see that the Buddha says, when he talks about the karma that is created and you have to experience its results, he said that bodily, verbal, and mental karma arisen from unwholesome volition will have a painful outcome and result. Okay? But how painful is not stated. To what extent of pain one has to undergo, not stated. It just says that any bodily, verbal, or mental karma that is done out of unwholesome volition will have a painful outcome and result. And conversely, bodily karma, verbal karma, and mental karma that is arisen from wholesome volition will have a pleasant outcome and result. Again, the intensity is not specified. Correct? But here he's talking about the 3-4-3. You all know about the 10 types of bad conduct, unwholesome conduct, and the 10 types of good conduct, all right? He's talking about basically about this. So now, because this sutta doesn't tell us how much we have to pay, that's why we go on to the next sutta. The next sutta is a root sutta. It gives us more clues on how we can repay our karmic debt.
Just want to clarify, why does the Buddha say, I do not say this?
Again?
The Buddha, the last sentence, the Buddha says, I do not say. So what does he mean by I do not say? That means he's saying the reverse of what we understand.
He paraphrased what he says. I do not say that one can make an end of suffering without having experienced the results of past karma. Which means to say, I'm saying that you have to experience the results of past karma before you can make an end of suffering. That's the way the Pali goes. That's why I'm saying there's so many negatives, it can be very confusing. Okay, let's go on. But you see, as I said, this comes from Angulimala Nikaya, Book of Tens. And they are altogether 10 times 2, 20 points. When the Buddha talks about karma, he referred to the 10 types of bad conduct and the 10 types of good conduct. If you look at this properly, then you will have a better understanding of the next section. Because the next section, the opening paragraphs, also can be quite mind-boggling. Alright? So here you see, the Buddha says, there's a threefold corruption and failure of bodily karma, a fourfold corruption and failure of verbal karma, and a threefold corruption and failure of mental karma. And all of these, bodily, verbal, and mental karma, arose from unwholesome volition. And any karma, bodily, verbal, or mental, that was caused, that was made, that was created from unwholesome volition will have a painful outcome and result. This is what is meant by karma created in the way it is to be experienced. You know what I mean? All unwholesome karma is created in a way such that the results will be experienced as unpleasant, painful. And conversely, any bodily, verbal, or mental karma arisen from wholesome volition will have a pleasant outcome and result. Okay, you bear this in mind. If not, you will not be able to decipher the first two paragraphs of the next section.